Hi, this is Paul with another tutorial on OctaneRender for Modo. This particular tutorial is going to cover the Unreal shader, the NodeGraph node, some camera resolution, override stuff, and the new shutter speed setting. So this is all coming out in the next version of OctaneRender for Modo, and the exact version, there'll be a 102 at the end, so it'll be 3.0.6.102 or 3.0.10.102. The first three digits is the Octane build number, and that number there is the actual plugin build number. So the first thing is looking at the Unreal shader. This is a scene here sent by Adam Nerva, and he has done a lot of work converting working out what the Octane material would be for the Modo Unreal material. So you can see in this particular scene here, we've got the gun, there's an Unreal material. If I turn that off, the gun turns white. The bottom here is the advanced setting, and that looks, very, very good. So we can now open the Octane viewport. Now at this, there are absolutely no Octane overrides in this. So this is all using the on-the-fly conversion, which is converting Modo, or the Modo Unreal material in this case, into an Octane material. So you can see it's a pretty close match there. You can see as you move it around, it's giving a very accurate representation of the gun there. So just so that you get all the colors right, a few things to keep in mind. You will need to set the OCIO config to new default and set the none color space for your 8 and 16-bit materials. And then in the images here, you'll see that if I click that, I've just got using the default color space. So if you do that and then set the Octane images setting up as follows, so exposure 1, gamma 2.2, and linear, and vignetting as 0, saturation 0, you'll get a very, very close match there, which is what this is. So that works really nicely. Just to have a look at the work that Adam has done, I'll show you the node graph. So within the plugin, you can see that there's the gun mesh, and here is the material for it. So within that material, these are the various Unreal shader effect images. And if we go into this node graph, we see really quite a complicated setup here. So that gets created on the fly on your behalf. And thank you very much, Adam, for piecing that together. It's still a bit of work in progress, so that it will likely change a little bit in the future. Okay, moving to the next item. So I just wanted to have a look at the new NodeGraph Node changes. I'll just wait while Modo gets out of that advanced view. So I've got a simple ball here, and there's no Octane override, so when we render that, you'll see it's just rendering as the ball. So if we add an Octane override to it, you'll see that that's just a standard material conversion there. So as previously, you can add a node graph and plug that in. So once the node graph is actually used in the render, then you get the ability to edit the node graph. And for example, we can change the diffuse to red, and that changes on the fly. So that's all. That functionality has been in there for a while. So one of the new things we can do is go into, say, we can grab this moon surface and we can copy that This is out of the Octane standalone LiveDB. If we copy that into the clipboard, that gets copied in as XML. So we can click paste from clipboard, and you'll see that that has pasted that material from Octane standalone into this node graph here. So then if we edit the node graph, you can see this is what it looks like. So the sphere out here, that's an output pin, which effectively gets plugged into the mesh. And say, for example, we could adjust the scale here to make the craters a little smaller. And it does that on the fly. So when you've got the edit node button, this graph open here, any changes you make are not saved into the Modo scene until you hit the close button. So don't save while that window's open, because your changes won't get saved. Another really cool thing with this is if we say go into Octane standalone, and so we have the Quixel physically based render material, then this particular material is quite big, and it has some output pins, and you can see those output pins are at the top here. So again, if we copy that into the clipboard and paste, then that pastes that material into this node graph here. But when we go and edit the node, if we would like to be able to plug something into those pins, for example, you see there's a whole lot of input nodes here. The actual act of opening and closing that window goes and, I'll just move that across a bit, goes and adds those output pins onto that NodeGraph node. And once you have those pins there, you can plug any sort of texture into it, or any texture map. So that allows you to, at any point, create really quite complicated materials and have input pins into it, which you can then connect in the Modo schematic. So that is a really cool new feature. Okay, moving on to the next item, which is motion blur. So I've got a scene here, a very simple scene with the cube here running across the screen. So when we go in to render that in, do a render preview in Modo, we can see the motion blur there. So if we turn motion blur on, okay, so you can see the motion blur there. So now when you open the Octane setup window, there is a new kernel setting under animation called use Modo shutter speed. So previously, if you had that off, then Octane would render a shutter speed of 42 milliseconds in this particular case, or whatever you entered. But if you tick that, it will grab it from the camera. So to demonstrate that, I'll open the viewport. So you can see in this particular case, Modo is rendering the wrong motion blur there. Let me try and fix that. Okay, that's better. So these are the default settings here for the Modo motion blur within the Modo camera. So we can change the blur length to be larger here, and you'll see that the Octane blur length gets larger as well. You'll only get an exact match if you put a 0 blur offset in. So to an extent, the there is a control of that in Octane, where you can set the shutter alignment, so it can be at the start of the frame, the end of the frame, or in the middle. And to an extent, they correlate with the camera setting of minus 100%, 0 and 100%. So as we increase the motion blur there, you'll see that the Octane viewport exactly matches the Modo viewport there, which is yeah, really cool. The final item is just a small enhancement where if you have the resolution, if we're set to use Modo resolution, then the Octane viewport will pick up the resolution from the frame here. So at the moment it's 1280 by 720. Which is here, 1280 by 720. If you go into the camera and tick override the resolution, and then you change it to say 300 by 200, then you'll see that the plugin is now picking that up. So it will immediately reflect the status of that override render resolution on the camera. So it's a very quick rundown of the new features in the plugin. If anyone has any questions, please ask me on the forum. Thanks for listening.